What is going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, back with another Outriders World Slayer video to bring to you, and today we're going to be covering the third armor set that actually got dropped by the socials for World Slayer or for Outriders, and that's going to be the Scorched Zealot build that's going to be for the Pyromancer. Now, the Pyromancer obviously already has some really good armors that already exist in the game, some that obviously could do with some kind of like buff and could do with some kind of like rework, but the Ikari piece has always been a mainstay that's in the game, and the more popular mod bomber that's actually been recently making its rounds, and most people are actually starting to gravitate a little bit more towards, actually doesn't even use a legendary set in the first place, so it could actually be nice to actually have a set bonus that actually helps out with this. Now, on the plus side, on the side that I can actually tell from this, it does seem that it might be potentially gravitating towards that, but once again, it's going to depend on the mods, it's going to depend on the apocalypse rolls that you actually do get, so, you know, could it actually help out? Yes, it definitely could, but is it a case that it's actually going to be the way to go? Only time will tell on that. So before we go into any further, make sure you have dropped a like and subscribe, it really does help the channel out, and let's get right into it. Alright, so as always, what we'll do is we'll play the video on small screen, because for some reason it won't record it on full screen, you know, whatever, technology, and I'm old, I don't understand how it works, but what we'll do is we'll just click play, I'll mute my microphone, we'll go through it, and we'll have a look into it, and then we'll go frame by frame and have a look into it, just see if there's anything that we can actually spot, and as to what actually makes it so good when it comes to the mods. So without further ado, let's click play. So let's just wrap it up there. So obviously that is the video that just kind of showcases everything that's going on here. And let's be honest, this is primarily going towards kind of like a feed the flames, kind of like melee kind of side of things. So let's go rewind it all the way back to the start. Let's talk about the actual set piece now. In terms of like the pyro stuff, the pyro is probably got some of the better looking kind of like armor pieces that actually do exist in the game, when it's got like the glowing red, and it's got it makes it look like it's got just glowing with fire all the time and all that kind of thing. And so we don't really have anything to this kind of extent. What this actually just reminds me of is more of like if the Trickster was combined with a Pyromancer. Just because of like the fur and all that kind of thing, and the blue as well, it kind of contrasts a little bit. I do think it's a very nice looking kind of set, but it just doesn't scream Pyro to me. That's the main thing. Whereas like all the other sets that we actually do have in this game, like the color coordinated and all that kind of thing, this one doesn't really have much red on it, so therefore it doesn't actually tell me that's the case. Now what I will say is that the headpiece is some Ultron looking kind of like shit. That's where's that? There we go. Like, if you've ever watched Age of Ultron, and I guarantee majority of you have, that if you can look at that and you tell me that that doesn't look like Ultron, I don't know what will. That honestly is hilarious. But now I'm never going to be able to unsee that. But anyway, let's cover the aesthetics. You know, as always, they've knocked it out of the park, but let's have a look into it. So the set bonus we actually do get to actually see this is melee fires a projectile that explodes on impact and inflicts ash. Now, we just unfortunately, that doesn't tell us if it does any kind of like damage. It just tells us that it inflicts some kind of ash. And if it just did that, I just don't think it would be very good. I don't think it would be very useful. You might as well just keep the additional, like the damage and the flame and the burn that you can actually do with your current melee into actually go instead of that. So overall, I think it's kind of interesting. It looks like it actually does have a decent range, considering it hit this enemy and it was able to go here. So it looks like it could potentially, just for a melee ability, could actually catch quite a few enemies with this, which is kind of on the nice side. Now, obviously, we get to see the Sunfall mod obviously come down and actually smash everything into the ground. But the best part about this is that you can actually use your melee, and it doesn't slow you down. And I think this is going to be a huge factor when it comes to actually running this kind of set bonus over anything else, is the fact that while it does seem to, when we actually get this animation with the fact that the melee itself seems to actually do some damage and actually kill an enemy, the fact is that when we're not stopping our sprint, we're still running as fast as possible, and we're just running past and just throwing this ash ball straight at an enemy, and it homes as well, which makes it even better. It makes it so much easier to be able to try and aim in the first place. it's just going to keep you mobile. It's going to keep you... The main thing that always held me back when it comes to like melee for the majority of the classes is the fact that it just kind of holds you in position to do that animation. Like whether it be the concussioners with the ground slam, and we've got obviously the stomp and all that kind of thing, and the push and all that. The fact is that we've now got a set bonus that actually continues our movement, and I think that's going to be huge. So therefore, you know, if it may not be the best kind of set, it has something unique going for it, and I think that's going to be a really good thing to be able to sell it to people. So going from there, obviously we then get Ash and Bloom, where enemies affected by Feed the Flames skill explode and also inflict Ash. So you use the skill, and obviously every single enemy that's affected by that skill then explodes. And then if it applies Ash to them to be able to kind of freeze them in place, to be able to make sure that they're just immobile and actually just keep them there. So in terms of like the damage, it's going to be interesting to see if like on that side of things, if it's actually going to be something that's worthwhile. The fact that when you're able to apply so much Ash, maybe there's a way that we can actually take advantage of this and actually do even more damage. So maybe there is a reason to be able to use this. Now, I'm not a pyro main or anything like that. I don't know the full workings, ins and outs of what abilities and where on the skill trees and all that kind of thing. So maybe you can tell me in the comment section down below, is this something that you could potentially use with a bottom tree, or is it middle tree, or is it just purely top tree? Because I do know that top tree actually do use this to be able to replenish their rounds, their volcanic rounds, to be able to continue to keep firing if they were going for that kind of side of things. So we do get to see a little bit more, and then we also get some featured mods like Fire Frenzy and Ride the Wave, where skills Thermal Bomb and Heat Wave can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown. I don't know if these are brand new mods. If they are, that does mean that our Heat Wave can go up to 4, and that does mean our Thermal Bomb can go up to 3 before going into cooldown. Once again, because I'm not a pyro main, I don't know the full ins and outs when it comes to the mods. Probably should have checked before I actually did this video. But in terms of that, if it does mean that we can go to 4 and 3, then that's going to be huge for kind of like debuff pyros. But let's I imagine this will probably be covered in the build that's actually a little bit later on. So let's have a quick scan through if there's anything more. And there is not. So, but what we do actually get to see, and I think this is going to be reminiscent of one of the mods that we're actually going to see in the thing, is the fact that the pyro is aiming in a certain direction, and the firewall is coming back to them rather than actually. So I think this is going to be onto another mod. So let's skip over to the build. Let's have a quick look into everything that's nice and juicy over here. So they have gone into a Pax tree, and they are able to go into that way. But, you know, Pax trees have already been covered and all that kind of thing. So we're not going to delve too much into that kind of side of things. In terms of you know, Apocalypse and all that kind of, sorry, not Apocalypse, Ascension. They've grabbed everything to do with Anomaly in the first place. They grabbed some more healing and like, all that kind of thing. So I can see this being an Anomaly power build, especially since it's bottom tree, and especially with the skills and all that kind of thing. I can see them actually trying to stack up that amount of damage, which is great to see. So in terms of actually what's on the build, what's the bottom part of this, what makes it so juicy? So we've seen the Sunfall, we've seen the Charred Lance. What we haven't seen is this Corruptor Pistol. Now, the Corruptor Pistol has target-rich environment, where critical shots ricochet to 5 enemies within a 12-meter radius, which is quite a big radius, really. Ricochets deal 30% of the initial shot's damage. So we do have something that's very similar in this game already called Pinball, which actually does ricochet and goes purely based off your weapon damage. Now, this is always low, because in terms of like the weapon that it actually is applied to, which is normally a revolver, while they do have respectable damage compared to the other kind of weapon classes that actually do exist in this game, the range is so short, but on top of that, the fact is that it doesn't go into any of the multipliers or anything like that. The mod purely works off the actual weapon damage that's stated on the weapon card, so therefore it's always low. It's almost always a mod that you should always get rid of, so it's nice to see that we are having a power crept version of that, which allows us to be able to do 30% of the damage after all the modifiers have actually gone through, to be able to then ricochet off and actually deal to so many enemies. So that's pretty cool. I'm loving that. I think that's actually a really good call, and I can see that potentially being a really nice mod to actually start picking up. Maybe as like an Apocalypse mod. I don't know if necessarily it'll make it onto anything else. So in terms of like all the mods and all that, so what we have seen Ash and Bloom, which was what we mentioned. So it does deal damage, which means that we're actually going to be able to focus on Feed the Flames actually being a damaging skill, which is nice to see. And it also inflicts Ash to targets within a 5-meter radius from those explosions. So it's not just affecting the ones that you actually do use the skill on, it's also affecting in a small radius the other enemies that are actually stood nearby. Ride the Wave was one that was mentioned actually, and Fire Frenzy. So these look like they are tier 1 mods, so they probably are the existing ones that we already do have in the skill pool. So therefore I don't think we're actually going to be able to get 4 heat waves or anything like that, unfortunately. But what we can see is another few tier 3 mods like Molten Lead, where the heat wave, the wave will leave an anomaly aura behind for 10 seconds that increases weapon damage by 20% when standing in it. This bonus does not stack. So you use your heat wave, it will send out obviously towards enemies, it will send them all burning, all nice and good, and then you walk into the where that travel is actually, or where that wave has actually been, and that means that you now have an additional 20% weapon damage bonus, which is kind of nice to actually have. Why this is on an anomaly power build, I'm not entirely sure, but you know, once again, I think they are just kind of like trying to show off the mod, so just take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. So that's kind of a nice mod to actually like start boosting up your weapon damage. Unfortunately, you can't stack it up, so you can't use 3 of your heat waves to be able to actually get a 60% weapon damage bonus, but that is what it is. Cauterizing Flames, every percent of overheal gained through this skill of Feed the Flames grants a 1% firepower bonus for 5 seconds up to 50%. So once again, we've seen Overheal. Overheal already existed on the Technomancer when we covered the Pax trees. It was interesting to see how we actually do get to that kind of like level. So the fact that it's now Pyromancers can actually do the exact same thing. They can actually start getting Overheal as well, and that means they actually get a nice bonus out of being able to Overheal for additional weapon damage, which is actually pretty cool. Or sorry, firepower, which then feeds back into weapon damage, which is pretty cool. So that's quite a nice mod to actually go for, and probably is going to be one of the more of the mainstay ones if you are going as a firepower pyro. Voracious Flames is another tier 3 that we've seen for Feed the Flames, where enemies below 50% health receive 50% more damage from the skill, so this is almost like a finisher in a way, which is kind of nice to actually see. I don't know if Final Breath is a brand new one which reduces the skill as cooldown. I don't recall seeing that, but once again, I am not a pyro main. It's been a few months since I actually booted up my pyro, so maybe that actually already is in there. And then lastly, the tier 3 mod of Scorched Earth, where after the skill ends, the wave returns back, dealing 45,000 points of damage. This is at level 75, so that's going to be a very small amount of damage, and inflicts burns to enemies in its path. So when we actually saw it at the end of the trailer, that was on its return path back to sender, basically, so it is able to do damage on its way back. So overall, I think it's kind of interesting, but we haven't really covered the set bonus. Now, the set bonus is the melee fires of a projectile that explodes upon impact, which we've already seen, which deals 1.1 million points of damage. So it's quite a substantial amount of damage, really, considering what we actually get to see. I mean, it's around about that of death rate. In fact, it's kind of low actually. It sounds like a big number, but when we actually see things like death rate, where it's dealing 1.6 million points of damage every 0.3 of a second, and Firestorm is at 21 million points. Maybe it is actually on the low side. So maybe this isn't kind of like focusing into actually using your melee as an actual damaging skill. So it fires a projectile that explodes upon impact, dealing 1.1 million points of damage, and inflicts ash to enemies within a 5-meter radius. The damage of the projectile is increased by 25% for each enemy that is hit with Feed the Flames, up to 100% bonus that is then spent on the next melee skill use. So this goes hand in hand with Feed the Flames. The more targets that you can actually hit, so if you can actually get your skill to be able to hit 4 at a time, you'll always have this 100% additional bonus. Therefore, every single melee you're actually throwing out 2.2 million points of damage and applying even more ash. So it could be a very nice synergy to be able to have Feed the Flames, explode, deal ash, throw out your melee, does damage, deals ash, go back to Feed the Flames, throw it, and just repeat that over and over again. There's got to be a way for us to be able to benefit from the ash. Once again, that's something that we'll probably have to look into when we actually do some like build theories or anything like that. But overall, I like what the build is trying to sell me, but I don't think it's going to be anything good in practice, if that makes sense. So I do think the damage numbers is kind of on the low side, but it sounds like a fun playstyle. It sounds like a fun thing to try and get to work. So therefore, I do think it will actually get a little bit of playtime out of it. I know for one will probably actually give this a go and see if there is actually a build we can get dedicated around this. But in terms of that, I don't see it kind of overtaking anything that's currently in the meta. I don't see it taking over Mod Bomber. I don't see it taking over anything to do with Akari. Don't see it taking over Debuff. I don't see it taking over Nuke, Ash Blast, Overheat kind of builds. So, this might be more of like a casual kind of like fun build to actually be able to experiment and mess about with. And then lastly, what we'll do is we'll just show off, and once again, clearly that is Ultron. They've clearly taking some inspiration from Marvel for this, but hey, that's just me. So that just wraps up pretty much the video. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned something useful with ourselves. If you did, make sure you have dropped a like and a subscribe. It really does help the channel out. It really kind of helps us to be able to promote our stuff and to be able to get all this relevant news and all this kind of breakdown out to all the people that are actually looking forward to World Slayer actually dropping when it comes to at the end of this month. So massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. Let me know in the comment section down below, is this something that you would probably pick up? Let me know, all you Pyro mains out there, is this something that sounds interesting to yourselves? And feel free to educate me as you go on. Thank you so much for everyone that's watched so far. Thank you all so much to the Babylonian family as always for their continued support. It really does help the channel out. And that just leaves me to say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on that next video.